Yeah, it sounds like it's happening to a lot of people. I don't know if it's a conspiracy, but yeah. I did not miss the
They don't like
puzzle
what we're
piece
talking
thing.
about.
I did not miss the puzzle piece thing on TikTok Studio. For the record, if that was not a puzzle piece thing, they said I did it. But it is, I know, it's working for some people, not others. It could be regional. It could have to do with the servers. Like I used to work in the tech industry. It could be any number of things. Some people, there could be a glitch. Some people not. I think that's what's going on. But anyways, okay.
Felice, I can go longer today if we want to take questions too, since we didn't take questions. I can go an extra time to take questions.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think we'll just, do you want to just repeat what you were saying? I mean, I think that was super interesting. We are back. Sorry, I'm gonna say
my ADHD lost it now. Someone's gonna have to remind me what I was saying.
I know. We were talking about misoprostol.
Okay, so you do have to have a prescription for it because someone had asked that. Do you have to have a prescription? Yes. Can men order the medication online? I'm not sure. I do know that you can order the medication without being pregnant. So you can go online, you can go to Hey Jane, you can go to Honeybee Health, you can go to Aid Access, and they will ask you when you're filling out the form, they will say, are you pregnant now? And you say, no. And then they'll say, are you getting this medication for future use? And you will click yes. And what that does is if you're currently pregnant now, it'll take you to a different page and it's going to say, when was the first day of your last menstrual cycle? Because they're going to help you determine how far along you are, right? And based on that determination, determines how much misoprostol they're going to tell you to take, right? Depending on how far along you are. The abortion pill, So this is where it gets hairy. The FDA has officially approved the abortion pill through the 10th week of pregnancy. Off-label, it is used 11 weeks and 6 days into the pregnancy. So we do know that there is good efficacy and good reason to use it all the way through the first trimester, essentially. So they will prescribe the medication through the 11th week of pregnancy. But if you look it up, because sometimes people will tell me like, well, I've Googled how late in pregnancy you can take the abortion pill and I'm not getting the same answer. That's why you're not getting the same answer, because the FDA approval is one thing and the actual use is another thing. And that's not uncommon. We use things off label all the time, right? Trazodone is used for sleep. It's technically an antidepressant, right? So we use medications off label and around the label all the time. So in terms of the abortion pill, a very uncommon complication, right, is to have retained products, which if you have retained products, you have to go in and you have to get a DNC. The other option is to take another dose of misoprostol, but you have to be within a time frame to take that, right? Because there's a safety aspect. We don't want you to go into a spot where like now you're going to go septic. So it might be safer just for you to get the DNC. Depending on your doctor, they might give you, and depending on your case and your doctor, they may give you the option to take another dose of misoprostol. If you have retained products, you do have to get that out, right? It's a medical emergency. You are going to go septic. We don't want that stuff to stay in there. It's not good for you. It doesn't need to be there, right? It's degrading tissue, essentially. It's dying tissue, and you're going to go septic. So it's got to come out. So that's what happened to Amber Nicole Thurman. That's what happened to Candy Miller. And then you'll hear people that are anti-choice and they're saying like, well, they didn't die of lack of abortion care. They died because they took the abortion pill. Yeah. And if you do that and it doesn't complete, then you need a DNC. And if you believe that, if you're one of those people that's like, well, they took the abortion pill, you're saying they don't deserve it. You're saying they're not worthy of care. You're saying these women don't deserve care and they deserve to die because they took the abortion pill. How very pro-life of you, right? I don't care. I don't care how you got in that position. And as a provider, you shouldn't care how your patient got in that position because it's none of your freaking business. It might be your business because it might determine care moving forward, right? It might inform your care moving forward. But my job as a provider is to provide the care that I am trained to provide without judgment, without shame, and without qualification. Because you are a patient coming to me needing care. And if I can't provide that care because I believe, well, you took an abortion pill, so you don't deserve it, I have no business being a provider. Amen. I have no business providing care.
Amen. And think about and people wonder why we're saying that. In the case of Amber Thurman, this is a woman who already had taken mifepristone, right, in North Carolina, drove home. There's still leftover dying tissue inside her uterus that's causing an infection. There's no live baby. It's over, right? Like when she went to the hospital in Georgia, when she's passed out at home, her boyfriend calls an ambulance to take her to the hospital. There's no question that there's no fetus to save, right? This is a situation where she was honest about taking the abortion pill, right? She shared with her providers what had happened previously. She just had an infection in her uterus. There's no question, could a baby survive or not survive? And they refused her care over a torturous period of hours and hours and hours of her declining health. And then she unalived.
And someone in the comments said, like, great, I needed a DNC after a live birth for retained products. Yeah, you can retain pieces of the placenta, and that is dangerous, right? You don't want any retained products in there. So after you give a live birth, you're supposed to birth the placenta. If the cord snaps, and after you birth the placenta, it's supposed to be reviewed for completeness, right? A nurse usually is looking at that placenta. Is it complete? The midwife is looking at that placenta. Is it complete? And if it's not complete, we got to go in there and get it. We don't just leave it there because it's dangerous, right? And in the case of Amber Nicole Thurman, the woman that's up on the screen, that Felice has up on the screen right now, it's important to note that she went septic, right? She ended up getting, in her case, the details of this case are particularly gruesome. She went septic and her organs started to fail. At a certain point, you're too high risk for surgery. So I've had patients that have had cancer, right? And they have cancer that's aggressively taking over their body. And we could do a surgery. Like, I'm thinking of this gentleman that was an older gentleman. He was in his 80s and he had throat cancer. And I consulted on the case because he wasn't a good candidate for surgery. Now, he was going to die without the surgery. He was in his 80s. He had cancer. We knew this cancer was going to kill him. No matter what, we knew that this is what was going to go. So if we did the surgery, it was only going to buy him a little bit of time, right? So we're talking to the family and we're like, he's not a good candidate for surgery. We're talking to him. Your body probably can't withstand the surgery. You're an 80-something-year-old man with cancer, right? Your risk of dying during the surgery is extremely high. They decided to do the surgery anyway. He died right after the surgery. He made it through surgery. He lived about 2 hours and then he died. His body could not handle the trauma of the surgery. That's also what the concern was in Amber's case. She had gone septic and so many of her organs were in organ failure that they were nervous that she wasn't going to survive the surgery. But they went in to do it anyway. And at the point that they went to go remove the products at conception, they had to do an open abdominal surgery. Normally a DNC would be done transvaginally, right? So like, here's the vulva. This is your vagina.
I love this.
I have things, right? So normally we would go in through the vaginal canal, come up and remove the products through the vaginal canal, right? And it comes out through the vulva. Here's the opening of the vagina. Normally we would pull it out through here, right?
Wait,
she had gotten so infected.
Do it one more time.
That her bowels were infected.
Did I freeze you again by expanding the screen? Okay, you're back.
There we go.
Okay.
Now I'm back, yeah.
I thought I froze.
I think you doing it froze me for a second and then came back.
Okay. We're good.
So in Amber's case, she had gotten so sick that they had to do an open abdominal surgery because it had infected her bowels. So the area around her bowels had gotten infected from her uterus. So they had to do an open abdominal surgery. At the time that the doctor got to the uterus, they realized that it was too infected to save, that they would have to do a hysterectomy and remove the uterus. And while they were doing the hysterectomy, Amber's heart stopped on the table because she was so sick and so infected that her body couldn't withstand the surgery. It couldn't survive it. So she died on the operating table. And that's what happens when we wait with sepsis, right? It's not a matter of like, I have to wait for you to get sick enough. And then when you're sick enough, we'll just act and you'll be fine. No, you might be so sick that your body can't survive the surgery that you need to save you anymore. That's how sick we're letting people get.
So disturbing. And you, as a clinician, what do you recommend? I mean, it's just the question, it's just leaving the government out of this, is it not? Letting doctors who are trained do their effing job when they need to do it.
I even think Roe was too much. Roe protected until, well, to be fair, Roe didn't. Roe developed a 3-tiered system, right? It said in the first trimester, there should be absolutely no regulation. In the second trimester, this should be. In the third trimester, this, right? So I don't think that we should be regulating this at all. And then people will be like, oh, they want abortions up till birth. Nobody's doing that. Nobody is doing that. Nobody is going through 8 months of pregnancy and then being like, you know what? Actually, I don't want to. Nobody's doing that, right? Like, trust people to make decisions about their own bodies. That's what the answer is. Just trust people to access the care. And by the way, when people access care later on in pregnancy, when they access abortion care later in pregnancy, there's 2 reasons for that. We know through data and research that there's 2 reasons for that. The number 1 reason for that is because there's a medical anomaly. I just had a patient the other day she's now 20 weeks pregnant. Because I have another one that's 21 weeks. The anatomy scan, right? The anatomy scan usually happens anywhere between like 17 and 21 weeks, 22 weeks, maybe 16 weeks. I had 2 patients, best friends, had their anatomy scan the same day. One was 20 weeks pregnant. One was 21 weeks pregnant. The one that was 21 weeks pregnant, perfectly healthy pregnancy, everything's fine. The one that's 20 weeks pregnant, it's not going to make it, right? So now we're 20 weeks pregnant in the state of Florida, and you're going to have to go somewhere else for care, right? And we don't want that. Nobody wants that. And this pregnancy isn't going to be viable, and it's dangerous to her health to continue. So that's a 20-week pregnancy that needs an abortion. I think I shared on Felice's show, my sister was 16 weeks pregnant recently within this year, and she needed an abortion because the pregnancy was no longer compatible with life, and continuing on with it would have put her own health and her own fertility at risk. So my sister got an abortion at 17 weeks. So that's the number 1 reason. We find a fetal anomaly on the anatomy scan, or someone has an amniocentesis and they need an abortion. The second most common reason is because barriers were in place due to laws, right? Maybe abortion was not accessible really close to you, but you had to drive 4 hours away to get it. So now you have to take time off work, and you have to find childcare if you already have kids, and you have to pay for it. Abortions are not cheap. $500, $600. Sometimes people can't pay for that, right?
Up to $3,700, depending on your insurance and where you are. I was looking into the financial economic burden of ABs. It's disturbing.
It's not cheap. So that's the number 2 reason. The number 2 reason is that there were major barriers in place that stopped somebody from accessing care earlier. So if anti-choice people are upset about later term abortions, then remove the barriers and you wouldn't have them. Make the abortion pill more readily available and you wouldn't have them, right? So if you don't want abortions in the second trimester, then make abortion more readily accessible in the first trimester.
I think this kind of also speaks to what you're saying. This was part of one of these ProPublica articles, and it was saying Tatum said she's seeing many women in their late 30s and 40s who, even though they'd like to have a child, worry they wouldn't have an option to end the pregnancy if it turned out that the baby wouldn't be born healthy. Quote, what happens if I end up with a genetically abnormal fetus, which is very common later in age, right? This is what happens, a genetically abnormal fetus. Tatum said her patients have asked her. They worry their options are limited, she said. They'd be treated like a criminal. Who wants
And they will.
to? And we have to hear from the right. Oh, people need to have babies. People need to have babies. Well, I'm not safe if I do. I'm going to be treated like a criminal and possibly left to be unalived.
Yeah. And we do know that obviously the older you get, the more at risk you are for certain complications, right? It's not the same way that men on the internet like to put like men are and actually let's talk about the flip of that because that's really important. But the older you get, the more likely you are to have complications. The older your male partner over the age of 36, the more likely you are to have complications. Because what we hear about all the time, oh, well, women over 35 shouldn't be having babies. Men over 35 shouldn't be having babies either. Because now I don't actually believe that. Let me be clear. I don't actually believe that. That's misogynistic crap. Have a baby when you want to have a baby, but you should have access to good health care to have healthy babies. But the same reason that you say women over 35 shouldn't have babies is because the quality of the eggs degrades over time, right? Over time, the egg quality degrades. Guess what else degrades over time? The quality of sperm, the quality of the genetic material in the sperm. So men over the age of 35, 36 also put their female partners at extreme risk for having unhealthy pregnancies, even if your partner is 26, 27, 28 years old. If you as a man are over the age of 36, you are contributing genetically degraded material to that pregnancy, and you are putting your female partner at higher risk. Now, when that pregnancy turns unhealthy, guess who we're going to blame? The woman. We're not going to blame the man. We're not going to look at the man and be like, hey, bro, you're 40 and she's 25. You're actually the reason that this happened, right? Usually we can't prove that anyway, right? If it's a genetically unviable pregnancy, it's just a genetically unviable pregnancy. We're going to terminate the pregnancy if that's what the person wants, right? But most people blame the woman and they look at that. The exact same thing is true for men. And we've only found that out within the last 10 years because due to our misogynistic healthcare system, we always blame the woman. We're like, oh, well, even if she was 28 and the man was 40, we were like, well, it must be the woman's problem. She's the one carrying the pregnancy. And what we found out in the last decade or so is no, actually, it's 50-50. Men contribute just as much to the genetic degradation of a pregnancy. So men, if you're over the age of 36, you're contributing to that issue as well. You need to get your sperm checked. You need to get your swimmers checked. And you should have a medically monitored pregnancy. That's all you need. You just need a medically monitored pregnancy, and that's totally okay. People are having babies in their 40s, and it's fine. But you deserve the medical monitoring, and you can't get it in these abortion ban states in the same way that you can in states that have access.
Okay, two things. Number one, thank you, Mick Angry Raid. We're just talking about some pretty intense things, and I didn't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation. And two, Carlos, if you continue spreading misinformation in the chat, a doctor is speaking. You are learning from a doctor. You can listen and stop spreading misinformation, or you can be muted. Those are your choices, Carlos. Open your ears. Stop moving your fingers or you can be muted. Thank you, Matt Raid. Love Matt. He's amazing.
Well, one of the things that Carlos said, oh, my grandpa had a kid at 65 and it's an engineer. And that's how uneducated men are. Men think an anecdote is equal to data and research. There's women at 65 that have had kids and the kids are perfectly fine too. Big deal. Women, there's literally examples of women that have had kids in their 60s.
Anecdotal experience. Carlos, are you listening to a word anyone's saying? No one's saying a 65-year-old woman can have a healthy baby. It could happen. Statistically, it could happen. But the quality of the eggs are degraded over time, just like the quality of men's sperm is degraded over time. Thank you for repeating the one random story. No one cares if your 65-year-old grandpa impregnated a 28-year-old. It is gross. Thank you for sharing. We got it. Now let's move on, Carlos. Next time Carlos says some ridiculous, uneducated, anecdotal experience, please mute him. I've had enough. Sorry.
Carlos doesn't even know what an anecdote is. He just had to Google it.
He doesn't know what the word. No, he doesn't know what the word anecdote means. He just says random asinine things in comments and gets blocked. That's pretty much what he does. Sorry. I've just had it with men who know not what they are speaking about coming into chats and saying asinine things. Like, read a book. Thank you.
And this is an example of male audacity, right?
Yeah, the absolute audacity. A doctor is speaking. You sound like an absolute idiot. Please be quiet.
He sounds like the legislators in Alabama that I had to give like a whole lecture on maternal health and all of this stuff. And at the end of it, hour-and-a-half long lecture on the danger of abortion bans, how they contribute to maternal deaths and all this. And at the end of an hour-and-a-half lecture, the number one question is, I'm sorry, why can't we reimplant ectopic pregnancies? I don't understand why we can't. And I literally was like, if you've heard this story before, I apologize. I literally was like, we can't. We just can't. That's not how it works. It's not like you just pick it up, move it over here. That's not how implantation works. And they kept pushing me on it. They're like, but why can't we? But why can't we? And finally I said, do you know why we can't? You want to know why we can't? Because we give 4 times as much research to men's health issues as we do to women's health issues. And in the last 12 years, we've had over 3,000 studies on erectile dysfunction, which affects 20% of men. But we've only had 384 studies on menstruation. So maybe if y'all cared about reimplanting ectopic pregnancies, you should give the funding to women's health research instead of caring about your limp dicks. But you don't, so we can't.
Did you hear that, Carlos? Are you grasping that? Did you receive that information, Carlos? Did you receive it? Is it washing over you like a gentle wave? Maybe you learned something for the first time ever. I have had it with men. This is why I am ecstatically part of the 4B movement. Like, never again, never again until men don't embarrass themselves in lives like this, which will never happen. So I don't have to worry about it ever again. How embarrassing, Carlos. That's your lesson for today. I want to make sure we just cover the Georgia Review Board firing everyone, and then let's just go into questions. I think we've reached that point. But I mean, I think we talked about this, but I find it so disturbing. We talked about how Texas is adding anti-abortion doctors to their maternal mortality review committees. Well, we have Georgia just straight up firing all of them, doing a fascist investigation and saying someone released Amber Thurman's medical records. Someone released Candy Miller's medical records to this publication, ProPublica, right? We can't figure out who it was. We did an investigation. We don't know which one of you did it, so you're all gone. And that's what you can do.
They fired all of them. And this is absolutely a direct retaliation. So part of the MMRC, Maternal Mortality Review Committee, so every single state has an MMRC. They're made up of doctors, professionals, but also they're supposed to be made up of at least one community member. At least one community member. And the reason that you have a community member there is because you need to be accountable to your community. And also, your community member should be really well tapped into issues in your community that are contributing to maternal mortality, like maternal health deserts, contraceptive deserts, certain poverty issues, indigenous issues, right? So Texas removed their community member from their maternal mortality review committee. They said, we don't want a community member on our committee anymore because we don't want the community member reporting back to the community what we're doing here. Georgia just fired all of them. Now, part of your job as the maternal mortality review committee is to determine, number one, was this death caused by or exacerbated by a pregnancy? And number two, was it preventable? Is there something we could have done to prevent the death? And if yes, what was that, right? Because we want to put that stuff in place. We want to put those measures in place. Do we need more education? Does the hospital need to be held accountable and fined for something? Right? So we have all of these questions. The Georgia committee found that Amber and Candy's deaths were both directly linked to the abortion bans and that they were preventable. And because they found that and ruled it, Georgia fired all of them.
I wonder what kind of people they will be replaced with, huh? In a state controlled by a Republican supermajority, gerrymandered within an inch of its life, I wonder what type of people will be replacing the people that had the guts to say that those two unalivings, and remember, this is years behind, right? I think these happened in either late 2021 or 2022. Like we haven't
22.
they haven't even begun to see the cases. I was reading another article about the Maternal Mortality Review Committee in Idaho who said they're still looking at 2021 cases. They can't speak to any of them. They haven't even started the work post Dobbs. Like, is that true? We don't know. I don't know, but that's what they're saying. These are years behind. Who knows what's happening in the day to day?
And that's normal, right? So being 2 years behind, like right now, we have our maternal mortality numbers for 2023, right? The national numbers for 2023. We're at the end of 2024. We will not get the national numbers for 2024 until about the middle to end of 2025. It does take a long time for these committees to review these cases, to review these medical records, right? You have to imagine if somebody dies in childbirth or related to a pregnancy, their medical record might be 100 pages long. And you got to go through all of that and you got to review all of that and you got to figure out what was happening with this person in the community, right? We know that poverty, if you live in poverty, your rates of maternal mortality go up, right? Your risks of maternal mortality go up. So there's all these other factors that they're looking at. So we are standard 2 years behind, right? So in 2024, we're usually reviewing 2022 data. In 2025, we're going to be looking at 2023 data. So when all this stuff started to come down, when all these abortion bans started to come down, we knew that we wouldn't get data on women that have died due to the bans for a couple years. We're just now getting to review that data because remember, Dobbs was a decision that was made in June of 2022. So we're just now getting to post-June 2022 data. And so now we're starting to find all of these deaths. And someone in the comments said like, wow, it's really sad that there are that many deaths. Yeah, it is, because our maternal mortality number is consistently 3 times higher than any other developed nation. We by far have the highest maternal mortality rate of any other developed nation, by far.
And these developed nations enjoy universal health care as well, right? By nature of being underinsured. It's worth noting, though, just because of all the reading I've been doing in the last 24 hours, for Black women, right, being insured, not being in poverty seems to not help. Right. If you are Black, you are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth. If you are rich, if you are poor, it doesn't matter. If you are well educated, if you have a great job, that's not going to help you, Black women. Sorry. Apparently, misogynoir permeates through all of that. And you are still more likely to die in childbirth. So even upward mobility does not seem to be helping Black women. Black women are the most educated group in the country, I believe now. Still not helping. So should we take some questions? Does anyone have questions or for Danielle, things they want to talk about? We probably have a few more minutes if people want to. I know this has been a lot of information on a lot of depressing topics, but it just felt like we needed to discuss it because it's so disturbing. Hey, Toodle.
Hey, everybody. How are you both doing?
We're just hanging in.
Well,
Well, I mean, of course, given the heavy nature of the subject, I'm sure.
I'm wearing
as good
black.
as
I feel like
could
I
be
was
expected.
coming to a funeral today. That's literally what I'm wearing.
I thought that was for your MAGA fam. I survived mine this weekend. My question, though, I can't recall what the law is. It's related to what you guys are talking about with Dobbs and everything. Isn't there like a law that they're trying to overturn that for people that are protesting against AB clinics, you're not allowed to approach them to get in their faces and stop them, and they're trying to overturn that to allow it or to make that a crime? Is there something like that?
It's like that doesn't have a weird acronym that has to do with music. Yeah, there's some. I know what you're talking about. It's not chorus or harp. There's some. I know what you're talking about. The law, and it basically is about you can't approach clinics. Do you know what he's talking about, Danielle? I can look it up. I'm just typing something.
You're muted, Danielle.
Danielle, you're muted.
there we go. Sorry, guys, I'm snacking. That's why. It's essentially, sorry, I'm starving. I ran clinic this morning and I didn't get to feed myself. So, it's essentially a barrier law. I can't think of the name of the law. And now that you have said that, Felice, I want to say HARP, but I'm like, I think that's another one.
I think it's a different one. Yeah, it's something though.
It is.
It's an acronym that I can't remember.
So it's a barrier. So it says that protesters of clinics have to be so far back, right? Like 300 feet back, or they can't be on the property. And so what they're trying to do, freedom access to clinic entrances. There you go. It's the FACE law. So they're trying to say that you have to be so far back, right? You have to be so far back from the clinic. And what they're doing is they're challenging that. And they're saying, no, actually, we should be able to be in the clinic, like in the actual clinic.
Yeah, I believe it's probably in the Fifth Circuit with Kesmerick in Texas, probably.
I'm trying to see where it's at right now in the court system.
Because that's where they like to send them. That's where the Preston case went before it went to SCOTUS.
They should stop judge shopping, but yeah, it's still continuing.
Yeah, I think the commenter just mentioned. I think SCOTUS it made it through the circuit. I think it's going to be on the next docket. I think
that wouldn't surprise me. But they are definitely judge shopping. That judge in Texas, Matthew Kacsmaryk out of Amarillo. If y'all notice any of these cases, like the mifepristone case, it was the mifepristone case that went up. One of the LGBTQ cases that went up. A lot of the major cases that are about abortion care or about LGBTQ rights, they can shop for any federal judge they want. And they're purposely choosing this one judge in Amarillo, Texas, because he will always side with the Republicans. So yeah, they're definitely judge shopping. It's not even a secret. Like, people in SCOTUS have noted that they've been judge shopping. Nothing's stopping them.
Yeah, they just rubber stamp it, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thomas actually did an interview and said he doesn't like judge shopping, and I was like, "That's interesting," because
the bribes aren't high enough yet. He wants more money. He's aiming for a bigger RV.
The more money he could get.
More about that, or had any more insight into it. It was just a vague memory that I knew it was coming up, and I figured you'd be the pro to know.
I got to be honest, that one I've been following less just because of all the other ones that keep popping up. Yes. But I do believe that it is going to the district court now. And it's probably one that we're going to end up seeing going up to SCOTUS, right? Like, once it gets bumped and bumped and bumped, and that's their goal, right? Their goal is to get a lot of these cases up to the Supreme Court. And like they did with Dobbs, hope that they rule for us or rule for them and against us.
definitely. Alrighty.
I'm
you can have
also
some
going to
notes
bring
up if
up.
you want to get some more questions in. But thanks so much, and love your program
Thanks to
here.
you.
This information is so important for not just women, but men need to hear this too.
You're amazing,
No disagreement.
Toodle.
Thanks. You guys are both a super big brain, amazing ladies.
Oh, thank you. Since Toodle brought it up, I'll also bring up one that I'm tracking, and this is brand new. This just came out. It's called HR 9594. And this is one that passed the House already. So just this past Thursday, it passed the House. It's going to the Senate. HR 9495. It is the Stop Terror Financing and Tax Penalties on American Hostages Act. Now, what that's supposed to do is it's supposedly going to give the Treasury Department unmitigated power to remove funding from any terrorist organizations. Except under the Republican regime, what do you think they're calling terrorist organizations? Planned Parenthood, abortion funds, the ACLU, the Human Rights Campaign. Those are all being dubbed as terrorist organizations. So if this passes in the Senate, it's already passed the House. If this passes in the Senate and then gets signed, this will become law, and it will give the Treasury Department total power to remove funding from those places.
You say the numbers again? HR, is it
9495? HR 9495.
Making a note of this.
Is it time? Thank you for being patient.
Hey, Tanya.
Hi, ladies. I just am wondering what we do if suddenly the maternal mortality rate looks like it's reduced a lot because we're not getting those reporting being done, or these boards are being dismantled or added with, AB, protesters or whatever. Yeah. How do we argue that with people? Oh, look, Trump took over. They got rid of Roe, and now look, maternal mortality rates have gone down. What do we do? How do we combat that?
This is a great question. We have asked the UN to step in on our behalf already. We've asked the United Nations to step in and do something about this, calling it a human rights crisis. It is a human rights crisis. Our rate of femicides are also a human rights crisis that we're not doing anything about. We have asked the UN to step in. The UN did issue official recommendations to the US about our abortion bans, and their official position was that the abortion bans were increasing maternal mortality. So internationally, globally, it is being recognized as a humanitarian crisis. We're not doing anything about it. Right? There's not much we can do when we know, other than be educated, right? Be educated and educate other people and vote out these people, right? Like vote out these Republicans, vote at the local level as well, because certain cities are decriminalizing abortions. For example, New Orleans, the lead prosecutor, the attorney general in New Orleans said, I'm not going to be prosecuting abortions in the city of New Orleans. I'm just not going to do it. That's what local help can look like for you. Now, the governor did remove any funding for them, for their infrastructure to give New Orleans clean drinking water. So now New Orleans has saline infiltration in their drinking water, but they're not prosecuting abortions, right? So there is retaliation that is likely going to happen, but all we can do is continue to educate people. We can continue to put pressure on these international organizations. We're definitely not going to get any help from our federal government.
Yeah, and I want to just say with the femicide thing, one of the major countries that stopped reporting was Russia, right? Who's no longer reporting on femicides, on mainly any crimes, specifically gender-related crimes against women. Russia has stopped reporting. This is the model that Trump wants to adopt, this authoritarian, totalitarian model, where if you just stop reporting, crimes against women don't exist. There's a great documentary also, sorry, I'm just going to draw some parallels for you. It's called The Hunting Ground. I suggest everyone watch it. It's about some some of the highest instances of rape in this country are happening on major university campuses, but they're not being reported, right? They're handled privately by universities. So these crime statistics aren't being reported because you're not going to send your 18-year-old child to a place that is a hunting ground for grape, right? I suggest everyone watches that. The underreporting of grape that's going on college campuses. There are like holes in reporting, and there's ways with statistical analysis and probability to try to fill those holes. Places like journalist publications like ProPublica become necessary to fund because that's the service they're providing. Whistleblowers are giving them this data and they're releasing it to the public, and and creating public awareness about this health crisis that women are being subjected to. I mean, that's what we have to think of, like non-governmental organizations who are able to track this data in creative ways become more and more necessary, right? As visibility into data discontinues, which I guarantee you, as we move towards authoritarianism, that is what happens. Less data is available, right? It's the discrediting of intellectuals, right? Of scientists, of people that can, and stopping reporting the data at all. China's another place, right? I think China stopped reporting their unemployment statistics, maybe, because they're going into like one of the scariest recessions of all time, and they don't want anyone to know. So, I mean, yeah, like that's our job, right? As influencers, as people who are educated, is we have to think about these things. How can we get access to this data? How can we tell this story when our federal government, our state governments in the highest areas of maternal mortality are going to refuse to acknowledge that there is a problem? That's something that keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I agree. And we're not going to see, even as like, there's been some big news agencies like MSNBC and I think CNN have both come out recently and said, we're going to hire some more conservative commentators because we feel like we need a more balance in news and media. And all that is complying with authoritarianism, right? It's complying with the incoming administration. You've never done this before with any other Republican president. But now that you know that a Republican president is coming in that will retaliate, now we see these major news corporations that are like, well, we're going to provide this to provide balance. And like, don't get me wrong, I'm not about having an extreme bias in news and reporting, but I don't want you reporting misinformation as if it's valid information either.
Absolutely. And think about, I mean, and I think we're not remiss to, and again, if anyone has a question, you can request now. Otherwise, like we can just talk about this for a few more minutes and we'll end. But I think we're not remiss. Like one thing I'm always talking about on my 4-day-a-week show, The People's Receipts, is that exactly what Trump said he had nothing to do with, Project 2025, which Project 2025, I mean, the pro-life section is, I mean, we are watching it happen in real time. The reason media is capitulating to Trump, he put the man that wrote the section on the FCC, Brendan Carr, in charge of the FCC. That's why Trump is doing all this. Oh, which bathrooms are trans people in? Look over here. Care about this. Don't notice that exactly what I said I had nothing to do with in real time. I'm installing all the people who have everything to do with Project 2025. Like, worry about who's in what bathroom while a literal authoritarian takeover of government is happening, right? That's what Project 2025 is about. It's about a database of civil servants, right? Civil servants used to be data experts, data scientists, people that could analyze data and make recommendations. No, now they're just Trump loyalists. They're conservative loyalists who will spread Trump's message. Like, I mean, we are going to lose access to data in real time. This is happening while we're all watching. We're watching the media capitulate because ultimately they are for profit. Oh, I remember something I wanted to tell you about the HCA hospital when I was doing. This is the largest hospital system, and especially it's throughout like the maternal desert in the South. There were shareholders, right? Because HCA is a for-profit hospital system that tried to come in and say, hey, I think we need a report for shareholders on our vulnerability here, like with what you guys are doing with miscarriages. We need to understand the policy. We need to understand where our vulnerabilities are. I think that's our responsibility to know as shareholders and like what could happen with future lawsuits. 8% of shareholders voted for that. So it was knocked down, right? Like, is that better for profit? Or is it better to cover it all up? I think what we learned there is there's 8% of shareholders in HCA hospitals that have a conscience and are interested in knowing, and maybe they don't. Maybe they just want to know where they're vulnerable to massive lawsuits in the future. I don't know, but 8% of shareholders voted for that, right? As shareholders they don't want the public to have visibility. Right? That is a weakness for them. And you have to see it that way. When healthcare is for profit, that's why we need universal healthcare. Healthcare can't be for profit because in for profit, there's no interest in people living, right? That's just more insured people they have to pay for. People staying alive is not interesting in for profit healthcare, right? And that's what should disturb everyone. Sorry, I digress.
No, it's true. So I'll read this sentence and like, I want y'all to pay attention to what this sentence means or this little paragraph. Some HCA shareholders, so again, this is a for-profit hospital. So people benefit from you being sick. They benefit from how much this hospital can bill. Not necessarily what the outcome of your healthcare is, just how much money they can bill you for. Some HCA shareholders have asked the company to prepare a report on the risks to the company related to the bans in states that restrict abortion so that patients, right? We're talking about transparency. We're talking about some shareholders saying our patients deserve transparency here, right? So patients would understand what services they could expect. And doctors would know under what circumstances they would be protected. I'm going to read that again. HCA shareholders have asked the company to prepare a report on the risks to the company related to the bans in states that restrict abortion so that patients would know what services they can expect to receive and doctors would know under what circumstances they are protected. The board of directors opposed the proposal, partly because it would create, quote, an unnecessary and expense and burden with limited benefits to our shareholders, not limited benefits to our patients, not limited benefits to our doctors who need to know when they can provide care and when the hospital's legal team will protect them. It provides an unnecessary expense and burdens with limited benefits to our stockholders. The proposal was supported by 8% of shareholders.
In capitalism, the only people that hospitals are beholden to are their shareholders. Understand that. It is all about privatized profit. They don't care about patients. They're saying, let patients check in thinking we can help them. We know we can't. Let's not provide clarity. Let's not provide clarity to the patients who are going to unalive in here because we're not going to provide the care. Let's not provide clarity to doctors about what services we can and cannot provide. Let's just levy profit out of these people while they're unaliving. Yay, capitalism.
And by the way, HCA owns a lot of hospitals in the US, and they are the number one hospital where babies are born. Of all the hospital systems, the systems, right? What hospital system births the most babies? HCA Healthcare does.
The hospital system that doesn't want to provide clarity into what care the patients can and can't get before they check in, so they can go septic in there.
If anybody wants to read it, because I'm seeing some people, it's on the HCA Healthcare website. It's called Proposal 5, Stockholder Proposal Regarding Report on Risk Mitigation Regarding State Restrictions for Emergency Abortions. Emergency abortions.
And trigger warning, it's disturbing.
It's disturbing. It's very disturbing. Let me see if I can get you there quick. HCA abortion stockholders. Yeah, you can find it. If you Google HCA abortion stockholders, you'll have to go through a little bit, but it'll come up. It'll populate for you. So I think I'm on proxyvote.com. So if you Google HCA abortion stockholders and proxy vote, all one word, it comes up at the top, toward the top of the page. So you'll be able to find it and you'll be able to read it.
Oh yeah, I just found it. Okay, cool. I'll put this in the Discord in a second as well. I think we're good for the day. I think that's enough amazing and disturbing news.
Yay.
Thank you guys for learning, and sorry for the technical difficulties in the middle. This will repost. Like the first part of the live is probably already posted. We restarted, so as soon as this live ends, I'll end it on YouTube and that will post, but there might be technical difficulties in the first part of the first live because again, some people could see it, some people can't, so I don't know. I know I'm irritated too, Cookie. I know it's so sad we're having these conversations. It's more sad and disturbing how few people actually care or understand what's even going on, but that's why we have to do it, right? It's our response. Hey, knowledge is a burden, right? Ignorance is bliss. If there's one thing I'm
True.
finding going into this new administration, it's like, hey, this is a burden we all have to carry, and it's a burden to educate others. But hey, if we don't do it, who will?
And I keep telling, like, everyone jokes about, like, getting pregnant in America right now. The amount of people that are like, I won't get pregnant in America right now because I know too much. I'm too educated on what's going on.
Exactly. And that's the thing. They think birth rates are just tied to economic issues. They are not. How could you be living in America and think, oh, I could possibly have a daughter? Oh, she has a future. I don't even have a future. I'm not even respected as a member of society. I don't have bodily autonomy. I'm supposed to bring a baby girl into this world knowing what I'm relegating her to? Like, you have to be, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think more and more people, like younger people, are just like, what's the point? I mean, there's a psychosocial issue to why the birth rate is declining that people need to start considering. Like, if you don't give people a safe environment, if they don't even think they can make it alive through a pregnancy, and no one cares, and we can find shareholders reports where they're like, nope, let's not tell them, let's just let them check in, they'll never check out, we'll make money off it though, that's billable hours in the hospital. I mean, this is the conversation going on in the largest hospital system birthing children. Why would anyone care at that point? I mean, why would anyone want to have a child? It's not responsible. Anyways, but I will leave it there. Danielle, any last words before we all go hang out with our MAGA families for Thanksgiving?
I don't think so. We'll have Thanksgiving's this week. I was going to say the next time we'll see y'all is after that holiday. So I'll be up in DC working next week. So next week when y'all see me on Tuesday, I'll be up in DC. Give me a like and a follow. I'm definitely getting my content stamped down because all I do is talk about abortion care, and TikTok is like, we don't want you to do that. But other than that, thanks for coming, y'all, and we'll see you every Tuesday.
Yeah, follow Danielle. If you haven't followed Danielle, follow her right now. Please do. She's literal national treasure. You make me feel sane every week. Yeah, every Tuesday we'll be here doing this. Mandy will join us next week. She's just doing some hiking for mental health, which we totally
good for
support.
her. We encouraged it, right?
Mandy is somewhere in nature right now, not thinking about the stuff we just talked about. Okay, guys, we will see you next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Don't change for anyone. Later, Gators.
Bye, y'all.